Hey guys, my name is Melody Ornelas, and today I'm going to be doing my midterm 2 for race and ethics. So, the topics that I'm going to be talking about are the Black Lives Movement and how race has really become such a social problem within our country. I'll also be talking about colorism, Thomas theory, a few very influential people that are in our country or that have made such an impact in our country as well. And I'll also be going over white privilege and how that has really overtaken our country as well. So, for my first topic, I'm going to be going over um, racial crimes, the Black movement, or Black Lives Matter movement, and how that all became about. So, in the midst of racial hate crimes, there came one day in our nation where it really changed a lot of people's lives and it created the Black Lives Matter movement. So in 2012, there was the Trayvon Martin case where Trayvon Martin, who was a 17-year-old boy, was shot and killed while he was walking home because he, quote unquote, threatened a man named George Zimmerman, and George Zimmerman had claimed that he had a gun and was threatening him, in which this was all false. Trayvon Martin was walking home after leaving a convenience store, and all he had was some candy and a can of tea, and did not have any weapons on him whatsoever. This really brought up many controversial things in our country because such a young boy died because of racism in our country. The Black Lives Matter movement was created and brought forth many people of color, especially African Americans, because everyone has the right to be free in this country, and racism should not be an issue, and it truly is. It is a great social problem in our country. With that being said, it is a crime to be black in public, in the sense that if you were to be walking down the street or to be acting suspicious in a neighborhood, in the community, you would more than likely be pulled over, or you would more than likely be stopped on the sidewalk. You would be checked. You would be body checked. Everything that would happen to you would just be because of racism, and there's a great likelihood that you would more than likely be arrested or shot at, depending on the circumstances, and you would be thrown in jail just because of being one of color. This has become a social problem in society because of the stigma that people of color, especially African Americans, and especially if you're an African American man, that they are more harmful and dangerous to communities than any other race. And mainly, they're more dangerous than Caucasians. Caucasians happen to be that one race that are really focused on and are rewarded for a lot of things and are not charged for that long of sentences, or if they do commit a crime, it's not that big of an issue. Another topic is Amadou Diallo. He was an African American 23-year-old that was shot and killed by 4 police officers in New York City on February 4th, 1999. Diallo was said to be a reckless endangerment to society, and that is why police officers felt the need to shoot at him. They were said to be protecting the community, even though it was not a crime whatsoever. Deviance is the action of breaking social norms in society. Skin color is a form of deviance in society because a majority of people of color are suspected as a crime and more than likely to be arrested, shot at, or be put in danger. Nicholas Wade was a British writer and journalist who wrote for Science Times and the New York Times from 1982 to 2012. Wade wrote many books on various topics, but one book that he did write about was about race and deviance. Wade talks about how African Americans, Caucasians, and East Asians are the main subspecies in the world. So with that being said, these are the 3 main races that he talked about and that he felt that were within the majority of the world, that there weren't any other races that really existed. This idea is very scientific because it is proven that there are more than just three races in the world. There are many, many different races in the world, and so this is very anti-scientific. It goes against what other scientists have found as far as there being Mexican, Asian, Caucasian, African American, Native American, all of these different races or ethnicities. Race is similar to vampires and unicorns. They are alike, but they are very much not alike as well. They are both unrealistic, which is saying that racism is a realistic thing. It's not, it shouldn't be, but it is a social norm, and it's brought upon us to be realistic in nature. But as far as them being different, there are different similarities, just like races. People of color versus Caucasians, we all have different similarities. We are all different skin pigments, but we are all the same people. We originated from the same place, and that's what a lot of people don't understand, is that because we are from different parts of the world and different parts of the country, that we are different, but in all reality, we are still the same person underneath that skin. So my next topic is about colorism and like discrimination and some influential people in our country that really brought up those topics. So colorism is the discrimination of skin color, which is very much a social problem in our country right now. The Thomas theorem is the perception that if there's an interpretation of a situation, it causes action. So for example, an example that I saw was, kids that are afraid of the dark, and it causes them to stay awake because they are not sure if there's anyone there, if there's something there, and so that is what causes the action, is because they're afraid. This theorem helps identify that because we're all different skin pigments, we see each other as different. Because of this, we act different towards each other in society. So this goes by racism, how a lot of times Caucasians see colored people, or people of color, as different, and so because we are different skin pigments, that causes us to react differently towards each other and treat each other differently, just because we are not the same color, we are not exactly shaped the same way, we have different facial features, but because of that, that is why we treat each other differently. Jane Elliott is a very influential third grade teacher in our country. She was a former third grade teacher that had a class a while back, and she did the blue-eyed, brown-eyed experiment with her class. What this experiment did was she separated blue-eyed kids from brown-eyed kids and basically segregated the brown-eyed children, and saying that the blue-eyed children were better than the brown-eyed children just because they had different colored eyes. This showed her students that racism does exist, and that we do segregate each other because we're different. And it showed her students that because we were different, that this is how we act different. There is privilege, there is white privilege in our world, and she was able to show that to these Caucasian kids by showing them with their eyes instead of with their skin pigment. This really helped these children understand that we are no better than other children, even depending on color. And this also helps show that regardless of who we are, what our color is like, what our eyes are like, hair, facial features, etc., that we are still the same people, and we have to treat each other the same, no matter what. She wanted to teach these students that it was definitely unfair in our country, and that no matter what, there's going to be discrimination. But by teaching them this, hopefully they would be able to not discriminate and treat each other the same way. Students were able to accept each other more, and they were able to go outside of the classroom and treat each other the same way as well. They really saw how much of a difference it made. Now, I'm not saying that all of these students acted the same way, but they were able to look back on it and see what kind of example she was setting for her students. John Howard Griffin was an author from Texas who wrote about racial equality. He was able to shed light on skin pigment severity by passing as a black man and going deep south to determine how dangerous and ruthless it was to be a person of color. With this being said, he was able to see how people of color were treated, how they were discriminated, and how much tension it caused and stress it caused for these people of color, because they were able to do a lot of things that white people were able to do. There was very much a lot of white privilege going on, and he was able to see that and determine how much of a difference it was and how much of a difference it continued to be as long as white privilege existed. His experience seemed utterly irrational because it was unfair how people of color were treated and how much lack of freedom there was. People of color had to do things totally separately. If they were to even go near someone that was Caucasian, it was a crime in society. And he was able to see that and learn how much of an issue it was in society, that he wasn't able to do the same things that he would have done if he was his normal self. My last topic that I'm going to be going over is just again racism in our country, how it affects our daily lives as far as work, as far as how it is now in recent times instead of in the 1900s. So my first thing I'm going to talk about is Alex Landau, and I'm sorry if I'm saying his last name wrong, but Alex Landau is an African American who had a lawsuit against the Denver police, in which he did win for a great amount of money. But he had a lawsuit against them for a hate crime that was performed with him in 2009. Alex was pulled over for making an illegal left turn one night and had an extreme experience with the Denver Police Department when he was beaten senselessly after being pulled over. Alex and his family were surprised by the incident because he did not create a legitimate crime. He made an incident by making the illegal left turn and just suspected that he was going to be given a ticket for it. And that should have been the most that should have happened in that incident. But it caused a lot of damage to him. It caused a lot of persisting neurological damage to him. He was beaten senselessly. He was called names. He was also called a racial epithet. And with that being said, a lot of this was caused just because he was a person of color. If this would have been any other person, if this would have been mainly a person that was Caucasian, they would have just been pulled over, and given a ticket for it, and then it would have been over. But because he was a person of color, regarding of what kind of circumstances that were going on in the incident, he was still being taken out of his vehicle and beaten, and it was not right. It was very wrong and not something that should have happened. The Black was a situation where food chains wanted to decrease the amount of colored people working in food chains and restaurants in the field of work. So what these people would do was they would decrease people of color, their workload, their amount of pay, the number of hours that they worked so much to where they would either have to fire these workers or make them quit, because they did not want that many people of color to be seen in their chains and to be known as workers within these companies. This very much showed white privilege and how much it is still a social problem in our society, because these white supremacists, these Caucasians, were able to get more of a workload, were able to get more pay, more hours to get more paid, so that way they were able to be better off and be able to live better lives than these African Americans were. With this being said, it would more than likely increase the likelihood of these African Americans to live more in a poverty situation and not be able to rise up and be able to be better for themselves and their families. this definitely caused an issue because, like it said, how the richer get rich and the poorer get poorer. A lot of Caucasians are richer than African Americans are. And so for this to happen, it showed that white privilege gave them the opportunity to rise and be richer, and African Americans did not. And so they were poor, and they got poorer because they weren't able to work the number of hours that were needed and get the amount of money that was needed for them to be able to survive. Freedom riders were civil rights activists that would ride public buses into the segregated South to, excuse me, to challenge the non-enforcement of the Supreme Court. They were treated horribly and witnessed how easy and better it was to be of white privilege. With this being said, they would experience what it was like to be in a segregated situation because they supported African Americans and people of color. They supported everything that they were going through, and they wanted to be for them because of how much of a problem they were going through society. With this being said, because a lot of white supremacists were seeing how they were being treated, or what they were standing for, they were being treated very poorly because of that. And it really showed them how much racism was a problem. It still is a problem today. So my last thing I'm going to be talking about is the Stanley Milgram and his experiment on obedience with people that were participating in this experiment. So Stanley Milgram was a social psychologist who was renowned for his experiment, the Milgram experiment, which is over obedience and testing how obedient people were when they were being told to do something. Milgram was able to uncover how easy it was to fool people into being obedient no matter what the circumstances were. So his group of people that he was testing on was a group of Caucasian people, and what he was able to find out was that they were given money, they were given roles, and how easy it was to make these people obedient and telling them what to do. With this experiment, he had one person that would flip switches that would give shocks to another person, and no matter how much it hurt the other person, he would still tell the controller to keep continuing to shock these people. And so there would be some people that wanted it to stop, but they really didn't think about it's okay to go and not to do it. They continued shocking these other people, and no matter what the circumstances were. In the end, these controllers realized that they never hurt the other person, but it did give them a psychological shock and somewhat psychological damage because they thought that they were truly hurting somebody, but Milgram was able to get the information that it was easy to trick these people. And it was easy to trick these Caucasians because they were able to have more power. So that was it for my midterm. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you later.